investigate the hearing gain because of the technique. Because actually it's not much a factor. We were thinking basically the thing we were investigating was completely doing it endoscopically. Second was to avoid any recurrences. We can totally avoid any recurrences. Initially, we had 3 recurrences in the first 1.5 years. Last 1 year, we didn't have any.
How much time did you take to be confident in handling the endoscope in one hand?
So we can all do that because we are all doing a nasal surgeries. Once you are doing a nasal surgeries, that part of handling the instrument is there, but the psyche of operating a endoscopic ear surgery is totally different. You have to be very patient initially. This is what I say to my residents. The first 25 minutes count. If you are patient with that 25 minutes initially, then we have won the war. You will be able to do it.
How about the skin loss of the external canal while using the endoscope?
I said it was not a.
You didn't come across any
No, sir. It's not. It's never a problem.
Maceration bilateral.
So only extraordinary canal when. Yes, that was the extraordinary canal outermost part. We actually tilting our burrs on that and rotating. That's why it's causing that kind of maceration. But with that use of that silicone thing, it's all not a problem. So that is the crux. We are avoiding incisions. We are trying to be as minimal as possible, minimally invasive as possible. So we are trying to do it as minimally invasive as possible. So we haven't able to do it as at the moment. I don't know the future. Maybe a case might turn up and say, no, I require that incision. Let's see. So as of now, no.
So in your consent, you say that you are going to do surgery without incision?
No. I never say that. I say that you're going to operate. You might require an incision, but initial planning is this, this, and this. No, it's never without a consent that we will not be doing without an incision. Yes, definitely. Yes.
So you did not have to convert any of your cases for an incision?
At present, no.
What about the colostrum which is extending to the tip of the mustard?
So we were able to handle. I showed you one of the pictures. One of the good follow-ups. If we can do it, see if you can properly facial ridge is lowered adequately, the matrix is not a problem to access it. This is what I'm saying. Well, if we have the matrix does provide that access to that tip also with the angle endoscope. With the angle
endoscope will you prefer if you want to clear from the mustard tip area?
It's a 30 degree. I use a 30 degree there with a good angled elevator. You can't just do it with the normal elevators. Angle elevators have to be used.
So finally, in such cases, it comes out to be a canal wall down procedure.
It is a canal wall down. Yes, sir. Yes, exactly. But the drilling is actually in the part which is concerned area, not the outermost part. That's the preservation we're doing without the incision, obviously.
In all your cases, we have seen that you are operated only limited colostometers.
Okay, so photographs didn't predict that actually, but there were 11 cases which had large cavity, medium to large cavity formations. Hence, we actually did on large colostoma cases as well. And initial incision I was talking about, the planning has to start from the beginning. We are once we know that the disease is quite big and it's like going till the mastoid tip or something, we'll raise a larger flap, or we divide the flap into medial and lateral halves. This is what we're talking about, double flap technique.
According to you, Vikram, what are the indications for an outside-in surgery now?
So I think complication, big abscess, they're probably there. Might be indication. Already we have given an incision here. Might be there, or apart from that, I don't think. No, I think we can reach there. Inside out approach also, and this technique also. All right, thank you.
Shailesh. Good afternoon, respected judges, my friends. And my topic is serum and tissue expression of vascular endothelial growth factor in recurrent respiratory papillomatosis. So RRP is basically recurrent eruption of papillomas within the airway. It can be localized, confined to the larynx, or can be extend beyond the larynx in the lower airway. It can be generalized. Human papillomavirus is a causative factor for it, and glottis is the most common site for respiratory papillomatosis. So, what are the issues with recurrent eruption? Patient would require repeated surgeries, which can lead to because of respiratory issues, the tracheostomy can be there, repeated surgical intervention can be there, which can lead to significant physical, mental, and social burden on the patient and the family. And there are 3 to 5% chance of malignant transformation of the disease. And patient may require adjuvant therapy, especially in the aggressive cases where the surgery is more than 3 to 4 per year, or when there is an extensive disease. At present, there is no gold standard treatment for it. So, number of methods were used to reduce the disease burden or to remove the disease in the past, and recently literature is more focused on HPV vaccination and bevacizumab therapy. HPV vaccination in adolescent women showed a reduction in the prevalence in newly born child, and it's proven. But in disease patient, recently literature is more focused on systemic therapy of bevacizumab, especially in high-risk patients. So what is bevacizumab? It's a monoclonal antibody against vascular endothelial growth factor. So vascular endothelial growth factor is studied in past in recurrent respiratory papillomatosis, especially in tissue. But bevacizumab is given systemically, so how it's respond to systemic therapy, that's a questionable. So how we are using either intralesional injection, which is preferably in aggressive cases, and systemic administration when disease burden is difficult to administer by surgical procedure. For systemic therapy, the literature is anecdotal and limited evidence. And even though in the doses is 5 to 10 milligram per kg body weight, even the recommended doses are serious complication like hypertension, epistaxis, gastrointestinal hemorrhages, and proteinuria. So, what are the patients who are likely to benefit with the systemic therapy? Should be we should take out that data so that the risk of complication is less. So, aim of this study is to identify the VEGF in the pathogenesis of RRP, as a systemic serum VEGF was not evaluated and studied in past in relationship to the RRP. Tissue was used, so I used both to compare the severity of in pathogenesis and association of these first aim with the disease-related parameters, and identifying the subgroup of patients who would likely to benefit with the systemic therapy. So in material methods, detailed history was taken, and Derkay score is a well-established scoring system for recurrent respiratory papillomatosis, and it was obtained before surgery. Patient allowed us for fiber optic laryngoscopy examination, or during surgery. During all the patients were underwent surgical intervention, and the papilloma specimen was sent for pathology examination for VEGF receptors, and serum evaluation was done simultaneously with the biochemistry department. So inclusion criteria I already told, and exclusion criteria when the other diseases which can affect the serum level of VEGF were excluded from this study. How we calculate the expression in tissue, number of the cells and intensity of these cells were calculated, and a score were given 0 for no expression, 1 for weak, and score 2 for strong. And for comparison, control group were taken for serum age match healthy individual, and for tissue non-inflamed laryngectomy specimen peripheral tissue margin was used as a control. For serum VEGF and tissue VEGF expression were compared with the disease age of onset, which is a pathognomic factor studied in past for the prevalence of the disease, and the number of surgeries per year, tracheobronchial tree involvement, basically disease extent, Derkay total anatomical score, it's also for disease extent and tracheostomy status. So result out of 32 patients were included in the study. Age was ranged from 3 to 60, and majority were juvenile onset type. And the location glottis was found in all the cases, And for to avoid the bias, we choose glottis beforehand because all the patients were primarily involved glottis, so the biopsy site was taken from glottis, and complete tracheobronchial involvement was found in 6 patients. So we can see majority were males, 18, and females were 14, and the age under 18 year of age are 25 patients, and above 18, 7 patients. And Derkay score below 20 was found in 21, and above 20 was found in 11. And 20 is the most common used scoring system for majority of the study. Tracheostomy is present in 13 patients, and tracheobronchial involvement, which I already told, in 6 patients. And number of previous surgery less than 3 per year in 19 patients, and more than 3 per year in 13 patients was seen in that. So mean serum level in study group was 154.32 picogram per ml. Within control group, it was around 28.18. When for tissue, 11 patients showed no expression, 12 patients showed weak expression, and 9 showed strong expression. And in the control group, only 1 patient showed weak expression. So when we compare the serum and tissue level with disease and control group, it was found significant. So first objective was achieved in the study, the VEGF have role in pathogenesis. But when we compare the age, it was not found significant. When presence of tracheostomy, it was also not found significant. When the Derkay score is more above 40, it was found significant for tissue, and for tracheobronchial involvement, it was also found significant. So this is a linear plot which we created on the basis of score received from Derkay score. So patient and serum level. So patient with extensive disease like tracheobronchial involvement has high. There's a trend is towards higher side in both groups. So it was found significant. P-value is 0.04%. So in discussion, management is challenging due to its aggressiveness and unpredictable course of disease. And surgical debulking still is a treatment of choice. And aim is to maintain the airway, providing good quality of voice and avoid disease, and treatment include adverse effect. But complication related to the surgery are repeated general anesthesia requirement, and surgery can lead to scarring at various levels like glottic webbing and post-glottic scarring and scarring below. So surgeries, this is one of the photographs. Tracheal papillomas were removed through the stoma, and endoscope is introduced via the oral cavity. Adjuvant therapy is primarily indicated when there is a 3 to 4 surgery per year, more than 3 to 4 surgery. So literature shows variable outcome with these methods. So what we found in our surgery, serum VEGF receptor and tissue expression receptor was compared to the control was significant, and Derkay score is more than 40, which we found in extensive disease where the serum and tissue expression was found significant. So in conclusion, high systemic and local expression of VEGF in aggressive RRP cases likely with tracheobronchial involvement and with high Derkay score. And linear correlation between the expression of VEGF in tissue and in serum was found significant, and we propose the bevacizumab therapy may be effective in such cases because both found significant and it active against these. So this is an experimental study. Whether the results can be extrapolated for clinical benefit can only be validated by well-designed clinical trial. As the cost of the drug is high, it ranges from around 11,000 to 16,000 per 100 ml. It can be done in our country only trial basis because patients are not affording that. Thank you.
Your message is not clear about the use of the antibody, monoclonal antibody that you are recommending. Is it only for the high score?
Yes, sir.
More than 40?
Sir, at present, 2 types of patient receives adjuvant therapy. One is with 3 to 4, more than 3 to 4 surgeries per year, and one is with extensive disease where surgery is not possible, like lower bronchial involvement, and in such cases, surgery is very difficult. So literature is favoring both systemic therapy for both kind of patients. But in our study, what we could find, those with tracheobronchial involvement may benefit with the therapy, not with those who require more surgeries.
You have not mentioned about your cases of tracheobronchial involvement with local infiltration of this bevacizumab.
Sir, this was not the part of study. Basically, this was not the part of. Anyhow, we use this data in these patients. So there are 6 patients. Out of them, 3 received bevacizumab, 1 received intralesional, but that patient had 3 to 4 more than 3 to 4 surgeries in a year. But it was not patient again present with a similar illness. And with tracheobronchial involvement, 3 patients is completely disease free, and 2 patients receiving treatment, and 1 patient converted to malignant transformation, and we lost it.
What is the length of follow?
So length of the study period in length of follow-up, it's around 2 years. The study was from 2016 to 2019. So from 6 months to almost 2 to 2.5 years.
So in 9 patients, you said that the expression was high.
Yes.
And in all the 9 patients, you were able to do the monoclonal antibody.
Ma'am, this was not part of a study. We are basically looking after the patient which may respond. Then we can
So
administer.
was there any change in mobility? Was there any change in counseling that gave to the patient that this is the histopathological finding that we had?
Yeah.
And
Actually, VEGF evaluation is also costly. It's also costly. So we preserve the sample for around 2 years. Then we evaluated that sample, because for single patient, it's very difficult to process the sample. So we preserve the sample for 2 years. Then we got the data after 2 years. So we follow the standard protocol, like surgery is a standard protocol at our institute. So we followed that, and even in literature, it's a standard protocol. And all other treatment which was given by the other surgeon as per the patient's need and their pocket, which patient can afford. So we are not interfering in that, because we got the data, then we are using that data after we got the data, then we are using this data for treatment purpose.
We need a larger study.
Basically, specifically in extensive tracheobronchial involvement, we need larger group of patients, and bevacizumab administration in these patients and long-term follow-up. What is outcome in these
maybe
patients?
a more robust follow-up also. Because
Yes,
if you are
long-term
doing the
follow-up.
test,
Because,
then it has implications for the patient. It is your duty to inform the patient that there is some more treatment which is available and you may be suitable for it.
So that was given during the study. Whatever treatment is available, all are costly treatment. So we arranged.
Cost of any treatment is to be decided by the patient.
That we given
As
that.
a doctor, we are not. We are there to tell that this is the correct scientific evidence, and we are supposed to inform them that this is the treatment which is available.
Yes, ma'am. We informed them. Those who have aggressive, we informed them. We gave in vaccination also. We gave bevacizumab also. We gave interferon also. So different modality of treatment was given to the patient. But outcome of study is different. So that's why it's not included here. We gave all kind of treatment during the study period also, and subsequently. We arranged treatment for the patient also. For those who are not affording, we arranged bevacizumab from hospital supply and from government other institution, and we gave them.
Now, off the record, what is the cost?
Sir, for cost is 100 ml is costing around 11,000 to 16,000, different brands. And if we consider, for example, adult patient 60 kg weight, then it's around 300 ml, 5 to 10 milligram per kg. So it's somewhere around per therapy cost is around 40 to 50,000. And we have to repeat in 4 weeks period, because single shot is not effective.
And
So
how long?
sir, endpoint is not mentioned even with other studies also. Even it was tried, bevacizumab tried in so many kind of diseases, but it's depend upon the patient status and outcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I will now invite Dr. Alok Thakkar, sir, and Dr. Sunil to felicitate our judges.
Thank you.
So now we start with the next session, that is the keynote address, and I would like to invite Dr. Sunil Dhanda and Dr. Rajiv Kumar to chair the session. Dr. Sunil Dhanda is professor and head at Lady Hardinge Medical College, and Dr. Rajiv Kumar is associate professor at AIIMS, New Delhi.
Dr. Ravi. Dr. Ravi.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Sharad is already waiting. I think we can, with the brief introduction, you can start. We can ask.
Sir, just a minute. I am just projecting the introduction of Dr. Sharad. Can you see the slide? So, Dr. Sunil.
Yeah, I can see it. Dr.
So we can introduce Dr. Sharad Chawla.
Yeah. Dr. Sharad did his MBBS and MS from Malabar Medical College. I never met him personally, but he is being trained in Adelaide, and subspecialty specialist is neurology. And presently he is working in McEwen Hospital, Adelaide. I think he's already waiting for so many minutes. I think we better. Dr. Sharad, are you there?
Dr. Sharad?
I think you can start. You can start, please.
Okay, thank you very much for the gracious introduction, folks, and the kind opportunity to speak to you today. I'm just gonna see if I can share my screen. Bear with me.
Yes, you can share now.
Just give me a moment, Ravi.
आधा घंटे बाद होगी जीबीएम जीबीएम के लिए वेट करते 4 से 4 पे उसको वैसे लेट हो जाएगी अनुग्रह
You still with me?
Yeah, Dr. Sharad, we are with you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just new to all this virtual stuff because, as you may know, we are not really suffering the same effects of COVID as you guys are. So I do feel for all of you. Just give me a moment. Right. Okay, how are we going? Is that on your screen now?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, thank you, excellent. So yeah, thank you very much for the gracious introduction and the kind opportunity to speak to you today. Now, in many ways, this talk is like showing light to the sun. Now, the subcontinent has a vast exposure to chronic middle ear disease and the expertise in managing these cases. I live and work in Adelaide, South Australia. My practice is in both public and private hospitals. and over the years has assumed a rather narrow focus involving ear and lateral skull base diseases. Talking about chronic ear disease is like being stuck in a time warp. Everyone has a considerable personal experience managing these patients and hence an opinion on what works the best. There is an abundance of literature with personal case series, but no high-level evidence-based guidelines. So in terms of the decision-making, the why, I guess, in terms of hearing preservation and rehabilitation, it has been an important facet of tympanomastoid surgery for over 70 years or so, but we shouldn't forget that the primary aim of these procedures is to provide the patient with a safe and dry ear and to eliminate the disease. When to reconstruct, I guess there are situations where there's a high risk of recrudescence warranting revision surgery, particularly in the posterior mesotympanum, and that may warrant delaying reconstruction to a later stage. Significant eardrum pathology, which also can prevent a primary repair in terms of ossicular chain, or cases like adhesive otitis media, where the disease process has reached an equilibrium and surgery may not provide any major benefit from a hearing perspective. The what, in terms of availability, choice of ossicular prosthesis, implantable hearing options can vary from institution to institution. And I'll cover some scenarios with illustrative examples in my talk. And the how really depends on your institutional practice and the surgeon's preference. Now, various attempts have been made to prognosticate the surgical outcome by stratifying the risk factors. And of the various classification systems in use, the MERI is perhaps the most well recognized. Okay, so now Don Hofer from Arkansas, he has got the OOPS index, and which is like an abbreviated version of MERI. It lays emphasis on incorporating the malleus handle in the repair, and also on the status of the middle ear mucosa, the degree of pathology in terms of inflammation, rather than just the presence of cholesteatoma in predicting outcome. And finally, the SPITE method is been developed by an eminent an Australian otologist, Bruce Black, who is based in Brisbane. And this system, unlike the previous two, it acknowledges surgical difficulty and the eustachian tube function, which we know can have an effect on the outcomes. Now, the issue of technical ability of surgeon in managing such surgery is not easy to incorporate in a classification system. And perhaps technical errors or surgical lapses of judgment are better evaluated in patients with low-grade pathology. Traditionally, the improvement in pure tone thresholds and or the closure of airborne gap has been used to evaluate the outcome of tympanomastoid surgery. And this slide acknowledges the two methods which were developed over 30 years ago, where the issue of patient satisfaction and not just audiological success in the operated ear. And it highlights the importance of the contralateral ear as well as the patient's overall hearing when assessing success. Now, I personally find the Belfast rule of thumb to be easier to apply in clinical practice. This slide enumerates the options at our disposal for hearing rehab in chronic ear disease. Now, with regards to the eardrum perforations, we know that the size does correlate with the degree of hearing loss. The location, as was previously believed, does not. Low frequencies are affected to a greater degree, and there are some reports that involvement of the umbo can in fact result in uncoupling of the ossicular chain and can have an additional hearing loss as a result. And lastly, somewhat interestingly, Richard Mehta's group had published results that the volume of the middle ear mastoid space can have an inverse relationship on the degree of hearing loss. We do see perforations of equivalent size with a different severity of hearing loss, and perhaps that may well be the reason why. The slide just shows that obviously hearing aids remain a significant or a viable option in a number of scenarios. And of course, the role of emerging technologies like cochlear implants and osseointegrated implants in rehabilitating. With regards to the OCR, in some situations, not a lot, the disease may have spared the lateral ossicular chain enough to allow resculpting of the malleus head or the incus to effect a columella type OCR. There is obviously no risk of extrusion. However, the margin of error when you're sculpting these bones is rather small, and it is of course more time consuming. Bone cement similarly can be used in a select few cases where there's an isolated abnormality like distal long process necrosis. In Australia, Stryker hydroset cement is readily available. The Automimix is a little bit more hard to get your hands on, but the Automimix does give you much longer time to work it because it's got twice the amount of working time before the cement sets. There's a whole range of ossicular prosthesis, and really the trend over the last many years has been towards using sturdy bar compatible materials like titanium, platinum, Teflon, hydroxyapatite in various combinations. All right, so I'll start with some, I guess, illustrative examples and cases, just highlighting the options that I've enumerated in the previous two slides. This gentleman is an elderly gentleman in his 70s with a rather large perforation, and it was almost always wet. And in fact, he had active infection on the day of surgery. I used cartilage graft, which helped to close the perforation, and I guess all the issues that were mentioned with regards to perforations are applicable, but mainly the gentleman was able to use a hearing aid in an uninterrupted manner. So that was the main purpose of giving him a dry ear. This is the second example. Now, this lady has undergone Bondi's mastodectomy. Bondi's is a procedure of immense historical interest, although one may have to refer to textbooks from the last century. Patient had cholesteatoma in her better hearing ear. It was involving the attic, remained lateral to the ossicular chain and was extending into the sclerotic mastoidea cells, sparing the pars tensi and the mesotympanum. The ossicular chain was intact and was preserved whilst the cholesteatoma was peeled away from the ossicles, and fortunately her better hearing status was preserved. This is a photograph of a young nurse who had attic disease. However, her pars tensa was quite atrophic and retracted, and it had resulted in a meningostepidiopexy. So during adipoantrostomy, the attachment of the drum to the stapes was left undisturbed. So there was no attempt made at hearing reconstruction as such. So the result, as you can see, was not too bad. And I mean, I didn't feel that I could make it any better with more manipulation. This one here is again a very similar situation. Pars tensa is quite atrophic and atelectatic, and the disease was, however, much more bulky and more extensive. This gentleman has undergone canal wall down surgery. And once again, the disease was sparing his mesotympanum, and I didn't disturb the attachment of the drum head to the stapes. And another similar case where, let me just. A similar case where this case here, lady in her 70s, disease was predominantly just in the epitympanum, and the lateral epitympanum, once again, peeled off of the ossicular chain, and no attempt made at reconstruct, no need to really reconstruct. So I guess these were a few examples where, fortunately, the disease was somewhat more limited. I was able to remove it without disturbing the ossicular chain, and a sort of an equilibrium of sorts was attained naturally, which was left undisturbed, and the hearing results were not too bad, I guess, or satisfactory in the context. Right. So the next patient is a gentleman who has undergone right-sided mastoid surgery in the 1970s, and whilst the cavity was suboptimal, it had remained relatively stable over the years with stable hearing loss. And he unfortunately developed cholesteatoma in his left ear. So he underwent canal wall down surgery, and intraoperatively he had a 2 centimeter tegment dehiscence, facial nerve dehiscence, grade 1 lateral canal fistula. So that was all addressed, and fortunately there was sparing of the posterior mesotympanum. Stapes was intact and mobile, and in this case we'd used a cartilage cap over the stapes to bridge the gap between the drum and the suprastructure. This was a remarkable sort of surprising result. Again, an aricoenterostomy inside-out procedure, mobile stapes, and all we have done is just use the cartilage cap. And again, quite surprisingly, she got a good result. Yeah. We'll skip that one. So incus intropositions, let's see. This is a 7-year-old boy who had a relatively brief otologic history, and he had undergone surgery to remove this mesotympanic cholesteatoma, a non-self-cleaning retraction pocket. And the ossicles were healthy except for necrosis of long process. So the incus was removed and reshaped to effect a drum to stapes type columella, and that seemed to work well for him. And I was, again, keen to avoid using allograft or prosthesis, which had a higher risk of extrusion given the thinness of the drum. So that worked out well for him. Now, next few cases are just to illustrate the use of allograft or prosthetic OCRs. So this is a lady who underwent intact canal wall mastoidectomy for cholesteatoma. In these cases where I'm doing intact canal wall, I do use the endoscope to look around the corners, the back end of the scutum and the tegmen in the middle ear to make sure there's no residual squames. A black oval top total prosthesis was used. And she's now about 3-4 years down the track. I'm monitoring her with a serial MRI scans to make sure there is no disease recurrence in the mastoid bed. This gentleman has undergone a canal wall down procedure, a significant disease burden, and here I've used a Sheehy plastipore partial prosthesis with a cartilage cap because he had an intact and mobile stapes. Okay, so don't always get so lucky, I guess. This lady has a rather extensive history of recalcitrant chronic rhinosinusitis, and in fact, she had extensive polyposis in her middle ear cleft. I also found a grommet which had medialized, and she had unremitting otorrhea in the lead up to the surgery. So she underwent intact canal wall mastoidectomy, balloon eustachian tuboplasty, middle ear exploration, and tympanoplasty. And considering the burden of disease, I was pleasantly surprised that her eardrum remained intact. I was almost convinced that it was going to break down in the postoperative period. She, however, has a moderate hearing loss, and given the intensity of inflammation in the middle ear space, I have advised her to use a hearing aid. I can't really make that any better with further surgery. This is a young medical colleague who is a budding eye surgeon and presented to me with acutely inflamed and infected cholesteatoma that had gone unrecognized for some time. He underwent canal wall down mastectomy, but at the time of that surgery, because of that acute infection inflammation, there was some minor cavity issues which needed a second surgery. And at that time, I'd used a total prosthesis with a hydroxyapatite head for OCR, but the outcome is clearly unsatisfactory. He has got good hearing on his other side, and he is happy to use a hearing aid on an as-needed basis when the situation demands. So hearing aids are useful in a number of patients, and as we know, in patients with open cavities, they have got a large meatus, and that can result in the use of a rather large occlusive mold, and in some cases, obviously, does predispose to cavity infection, which I guess brings us to the next slide. So this individual has undergone numerous surgeries under a number of very experienced surgeons, and his cavity remains really quite unsatisfactory, troublesome, and clearly an inability to use a hearing aid in such a situation, which opens up the opportunity to use osseointegrated devices. So he underwent BAHA insertion, and that worked well. And in fact, allowing that sort of uncoupling, there's nothing blocking the ear canal, which has allowed, in fact, the cavity to stabilize somewhat. So in addition to the well-known percutaneous abutment, there are other device options. So the transcutaneous magnet, and in fact, with the Medel, they have got this adhere, like a sticker sort of a thing, which attaches to the mastoid skin and allegedly needs to be replaced once a week. BAHA ARC.
Dr. Sharad, can you wind up? We are getting late.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah, please. I'm sorry, but
It's okay, thank you.
Yeah.
This is the last one, actually. So this is a woman who has undergone 2 operations before, presented to me with clearly evidence of recurrent disease, residual disease, and he had significant hearing loss. The middle audiogram is the one before his surgery, and it showed that he had considerable loss, unedible sort of hearing loss. And he underwent removal of the cholesteatoma, blind sac closure, and returned a year later for a cochlear implant. Now, cochlear implants in chronic ear disease will require meticulous or complete removal of the disease naturally, blind sac closure, at least a 2-layer closure. Some surgeons would recommend vascularized tissue to reinforce a deep aspect if there is infection. Obliteration of eustachian tube, particularly when there's significant mucosal disease burden, and mastoid obliteration. So if abdominal fat is used most commonly, we do use that for various other lateral skull-based procedures. Some surgeons are a bit cautious. They think that use of fat can make it harder in terms of follow-up radiologically, and also a potential source of getting infections. But generally, the trends are towards using the fat for obliteration. So chronic middle ear disease with cochlear implants, the simplest option would be to eliminate the disease, reconstruct the eardrum if that's all the problem is, and do the CI in a usual manner. There are reports of protecting the electrode array in the mastoid cavity. To me, that sounds probably a bit more complicated than warranted. So I would tend to, if it's an open cavity, elect towards a blind sac closure, eustachian tube plugging, and have a low threshold of doing a 2-stage procedure, especially in cases of active inflammation and cholesteatoma, and with or without mastoid obliteration. So to summarize, eliminate disease, that's the priority. Mobile intact drum with aerated middle ear space, preserved mucosa are important for a good outcome. where possible, incorporate the handle of malleus, although you do want to minimize the angulation to prevent slippage. And allografts have largely replaced the use of autografts for their sheer convenience. And cochlear implants are certainly an option in chronic ear disease, but you have to be aware of the need for blind sac closure, which can be challenging in the presence of large meaturplasty. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sharad. Very simple and lucid presentation. I have one question. Are you using microscope put together with the endoscopes, or?
I am primarily a microscopic surgeon. I only use endoscopes in cases of intact canal wall disease, because I do find that endoscope has the advantage of looking around the corners, especially like I mentioned, the back end of on the undersurface of whatever residual, the bridge, scutum, tegmen in the middle ear space. But no, I'm a microscopic surgeon. Yeah, I have a limited repertoire of using endoscope.
Okay. Any question from headquarters? Dr. Ravi? Dr. Ravi?
I think they've all gone to sleep.
I think they're gone to sleep. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for chairing the session. This is a keynote address. We actually will be felicitating Dr. Sharad with the certificate, and will mail to Dr. Sharad. The certificate will be mailed to him. Thank you, Dr. Sharad, for joining from Australia. I think it is 10 o'clock there, or late in night.
Yeah, 9 o'clock.
Thanks once again. And now I invite Dr. Rajiv to introduce the next speaker.
Hello, good evening all. It's a privilege to introduce Dr. Ramandeep Veek. He is, as you see in this picture, he is very sporty and adventurous, but he has a very keen interest in endoscopic skull-base surgery, and avid biker, as you see in the picture, a rational thinker, and a die-hard fan of evidence-based medicine. And sir has special interest in laser stephanotomy, and sir has more than 90 publications in peer-reviewed journals. So Dr. Veek, you can start with your presentation, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Ravi, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible. We just share your presentation.
Thank you for the gracious introduction. So my talk will be on a topic which interests a lot of us. Of course, it is endoscopic skull-base surgery. I'll be speaking briefly on transpterygoid approach to lateral recess sphenoid sinus leaks. Let me get into the presenter mode. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see on the screen. Okay, so I'm Ramandeep Veek. I'm a ENT surgeon, and I'm based at the PGI MER Chandigarh. My topic for today is transpterygoid approach to lateral recess sphenoid sinus CSF leaks. So let's try to understand what exactly is a lateral recess of the sphenoid sinus. It is nothing but an extension of the sphenoid pneumatization into the pterygoid process that gives thin bony borders to the sinus, causing thinning of the lateral recess roof and skull base. And when this is associated with raised intracranial pressures, it leads to an acquired non-traumatic sphenoid lateral recess leak. So this is a CT, this is a coronal cut, this is an axial cut of a patient having a lateral recess defect. But just to explain what exactly is a lateral recess defect, this is the body of the pterygoid, and see how the sphenoid sinus is pneumatized into it. So when this pneumatization takes place, the skull base walls become very thin. Once this is thinned out, and in case there is a idiopathic intracranial hypertension. This is a potential site for a meningoencephalocele or a meningocele to form and the skull base to get eroded. So CSF leaks from the lateral recess of the sphenoid sinus can be traumatic. So it is not always non-traumatic spontaneous. They can be traumatic also. They can be non-traumatic spontaneous leaks and or secondary to existence of a Sternberg's canal. But this role is controversial. So there have been many articles in literature which say that these are due to idiopathic intracranial hypertension. So I will not be touching the topic of Sternberg's canal. It's a separate entity in itself. So I'll basically be dealing with non-traumatic spontaneous leaks from the lateral recess of the sphenoid sinus. So spontaneous lateral recess leaks are associated with meningocele or meningoencephaloceles, which are nothing but temporal bone herniations, usually located lateral to the foramen rotundum. Management of these leaks presents a challenge because of the location and requiring complete visualization of the defect for a successful repair. Why I lay emphasis on complete visualization? Because many times we have seen that surgeons will attempt only the straight ahead corridor. They will be able to see the meningocele, but they will not be able to go around it completely. So in some cases it can work, in some cases it doesn't work, and the patients come back with a recurrence. So endoscopic endonasal transpterygoid approach is considered the gold standard in addressing these defects. So let's start with the corridors of surgery. Just for a comparison, my talk is very brief. I'll be showing you both videos. One a case of the lateral wall of the sphenoid sinus in which there is no lateral recess. And I will show you how easy it is for a head-on corridor of surgery. That is, I go between the septum and the turbinate, head-on onto the sphenoid sinus, widen the ostia, repair the defect, and come out. And the second video I will be showing will be a case in which there is a lateral recess, and you will be able to appreciate how deeply seated the defects usually are and are not amenable to treatment with a head-on corridor. So let's say this is a sphenoid sinus, bilateral. We can see a small defect pointed by the right arrow on the yellow arrow on the right-hand side. But see, there is no lateral recess. So in a case like this, we should be able to approach the sphenoid sinus head-on, that is working between the turbinate and the nasal septum. But in case, if I see this patient, this is a patient who has a lateral recess defect, which is circled by the red circle. If I come through the septum and between the turbinate, I will not, my endoscope would be able to reach the face of the sphenoid, but it will not be able to work laterally. But whereas if I go through the maxillary antrum, remove a posterior part of the maxillary wall, dissect some of the contents of the sphenopalatine ganglion or the pterygopalatine fossa, and then drill the face of the lateral recess, I will be head-on onto the defect, which makes repair very easy. So this is the same case. I'm working on the right-hand side. I've lateralized the middle turbinate and the superior turbinate. I can see the sphenoid ostia. Using coblation, we coblate away the face of the sphenoid sinus. We coblate the mucosa away. The reason I prefer using coblation is there is less collateral thermal damage. And of course, the field remains very clear. Once the sphenoid ostia is identified and coblated away, I use a ronger to open the face of the sphenoid. So once we are inside, the yellow arrow points towards the meningoencephalocele. I trim just a small part of the superior turbinate in the lower part to give me more space to work. Once that is done, you can see how the space has opened up. Using coblation again, I coblate away the meningoencephalocele. So I'm not using coagulation mode, but coblation mode. So in coblation, the meningoencephalocele is fulgurated away, and I can see a nice round defect come into view. The key part and the most important part here is I must create a bed for the graft. Hence, the mucosa a few millimeters around the defect needs to be dissected away. Otherwise, there'll be trouble when epithelization has to take place. Now using a sharp sickle, I further elevate the mucosa, just I would do for any other normal ear surgery, in which we call that freshening of the margins. Because the mucosa will be stuck to the dura at some places and you need to get those off. You can see how the mucosa is stuck here, and using sharp dissection, I will be able to peel it off. Same thing will happen inferiorly. The mucosa is still stuck to part of the meningoencephalocele. And once I remove that mucosa, now I have isolated the defect. Now we plug this defect with fat wrapped in Surgicel. Initially, when we started doing these procedures about 10, 12 years ago, I used to use fat alone, but soon we shifted to fat wrapped in Surgicel because it's just easier to handle in confined spaces. Fat tends to plob around, move around, but with this you have a better fit. Once we plug this defect, I use a small piece of bone, which can be taken here from the posterior ethmoids, and put that bone inside the defect by a underlay method. So this is, it might look difficult, but it is not very difficult since this bone is very, very thin. It is very pliable and it is very easy to work with. So after inserting it on the underside, we just gently push it to completely insert it by the underlay method. Now it is completely inside the defect. It has sealed the defect. There is no active leak. A small piece of fascia is taken from the thigh, fascia lata. Make sure the edges are not curled up because that can cause problems. It is covered by a spot of fibrin glue, and a piece of gel foam is used to support the repair. That is all that is needed. We do not use nasal packs post-operatively, and the patient is discharged on the third post-operative day. Copious saline irrigations are started 24 hours after the surgery. And this completes our procedure. Now, what you have seen now is a sphenoid sinus with a defect in the lateral wall, but without a lateral recess. Hence, our approach was very easy. Now, I will show you another video with a defect in the left side sphenoid sinus in which there was a lateral recess. I'm decongesting the nasal cavity with the Barocel dipped in adrenaline. The middle turbinate, superior turbinate are lateralized. The sphenoid ostia is identified like in the previous surgery. And I am ablating the face of the sphenoid sinus. Small twigs of the sphenopalatine artery which come inferiorly are coagulated. I widen the ostia with a ronger just like in the previous case. Once that is done, I can see an active CSF leak on the inside. The arrow will point towards the meningoencephalocele, but notice how I am not able to see it in its entirety. So that is the problem with this corridor in a lateral recess leak. Part of the middle turbinate is snipped away, leaving a stump behind. This helps us give us a much better access to the lateral recess. Once that is done, we do an uncinectomy. We like using the coblator to coblate away the mucosa because you will be able to appreciate that the bleeding is minimal. Then using a microdebrider, we widen the maxillary ostia. We do a wide maxillary enterostomy. Then again, using a coblation, we coblate around the sphenopalatine foramen. We take the tissue away. We coagulate any twigs of the sphenopalatine vessel. This yellow arrow points towards the crista ethmoidalis and the ball probe goes into the sphenopalatine foramen. Using a ronger, we remove the wall of the posterior wall of the maxillary sinus. That opens up the pterygopalatine fossa for us. We can have troublesome bleeding here from these little twigs of the sphenopalatine artery, but they can all be taken care of with the coagulation mode of the coablator. Once that is done, we can see the fat in the pterygopalatine fossa, which is again, partially dissected out using a coablator. There, I am opening up the space. I am taking the fat away. And you can see this blue hue coming into view. This is the face of the lateral recess. Any small vessels can be coagulated with the coablator. and the rest of the tissue is ablated away rapidly. Some troublesome bleeding can arise here, which is of course due to the Vidian artery, which runs along with the Vidian nerve, pointed by the yellow arrow. That's the Vidian nerve, and we can see a little bleeding coming from here. Then we open up the face of the lateral recess using a cutting burr. And as we open up the face of the lateral recess, you will see the meningoencephalocele seal come into view. But notice, till I get complete exposure and I'm able to see completely around it, I will not attempt to touch the meningoencephalocele. Once the complete bone work has been done, I again use a coblator to reduce the meningoencephalocele. One thing you will notice in all cases that the defects are always oval or circular. Again, with the sickle knife, just like you would do it in any ear surgery, you elevate the mucosa, any mucosal attachment that is left attached to the dura, so that you can create a bed for the graft to seat. Further reduction of that removed tissue is done, and you can see a nice circular defect coming into view. Once that happens, again, we use fat wrapped in Surgicel, and we gently push it in with a ball probe. Once that is done, again, a small bone chip is taken from the ethmoids, and this is again inserted by the underlay technique. Small piece of graft, that is the fascia lata, is taken. Again, the same considerations that make sure there is no curling up of the edges of the graft as that might impede the healing process. Spread it out nicely and cover the defect by the overlay technique. Once that is done, a spot of fibrin glue and a couple of pieces of gel foam to support the repair. Again, we do not use any nasal packs. And that completes the procedure. Make sure you check around with a 0-degree endoscope if there is any troublesome bleeding. You don't want the patient to bleed in the post-operative period. And that completes the procedure. So this is a post-operative picture of the same patient, and see how well the defect has epithelialized. We published our data in World Neurosurgery this year. It was titled Plasma Ablation Assisted Endoscopic Endonasal Transpterygoid Approach to Sphenoid Lateral Recess Cerebrospinal Fluid Leaks, Techniques and Outcomes. This was a series of 11 cases from 2011 to 2020, and only those cases were taken which we had done with a coblation device. Older cases which we had done with bipolar or other cautery devices were not taken into consideration. So to conclude this is for the young surgeons and my younger colleagues who are embarking on a career of skull-base surgery. Start with simpler cases. At least start with cases like the first case I showed you, in which the corridors are much simpler to handle. Learn to read the scans. This is very, very important. We usually read the scans directly from the DICOM images, because this tells us exactly where the defect is. Many times we can miss defects of the posterior ethmoid or the sphenoid, because most commonly, most of us see defects of the cribriform. So defects in the posterior part can be missed out. Whenever there is trouble or you feel there can be a complication, take the help of a senior colleague. There is no harm in that. Use coblation if available. Make sure bone is bare a few millimeters all around the defect for the graft to seat. Like you saw, I use a sickle knife. I ablate away the mucosa, which is easily ablatable. And then with a sickle knife, I freshen and remove all that edges to create a bed of bare bone. Release the dura, like we saw. Many times the dura is attached to the mucosa. So we have to release that just like you would do in an ear surgery or freshening the margins of the graft. And use fat wrapped in Surgicel to make handling easy. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, sir, for such an excellent presentation and a very nice demonstration of two different techniques. I'm sure all of us will have learned so much from this presentation. Any questions are invited? No.
We're running short of time.
Okay. Hello. Thank you, sir. There are no
Thank you.
questions.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank
Excellent presentation, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramandeep, for joining, and it was as usual, very nice lucid presentation on CSF primary and lateral business approach. Now we'll start the GBM, and I will request all the non-members to leave the meeting. I will request all the non-members who are not the member of Delhi OI to leave the online meeting, as well as who are present here in the hall, who are non-members can leave. The protocol. Good evening, everybody. Now नहीं अभी एक ऑन कर दिया राइट अब करें गुड इवनिंग एवरीबॉडी now we have general body meeting and the agenda for today's meeting is to adopt the minutes of the last annual general body meeting held on 2nd March 2019 at Lady Hardinge Medical College. So I asked somebody to approve the meeting. Should I read the minutes of the meeting? Yeah, you have to read. Okay. So the last meeting was held on 2nd March 2019 at Lady Hardinge Medical College at 7 p.m. in the Swarn Jayanti Auditorium. Dr. Ashok Kumar was the president who started the meeting and thanked all the members who were present. Dr. Ravi Meher, Secretary, Delhi OI, presented the secretary report. Following matters were discussed in the GBM. The minutes of the last annual general body meeting held on 7th April 2018 at Bhutan were passed unanimously. There were no condolence resolutions from any members. The report of Honorary Secretary was passed unanimously. The report of Honorary Treasurer was passed unanimously. The matter of the income tax was discussed and it was decided that CA and an advocate to be consulted for all pending income tax issue and PAN number issue. Announcement of the election results. The election results were announced by Dr. Ishwar Singh and Dr. H.C. Taneja was declared president-elect unanimously. The need for change of the auditors for the current financial year was discussed as we were facing problems with the present CA, and it was decided by that the executive committee members may take a decision in this regard. New members were approved by the GBM. Bidding for the National AY 2022 was discussed, and Dr. Rajesh Kalla approved the same, which was seconded by Dr. Vipin, that we should bid for National AY for year 2022. And since there were large number of entries of Mukut Sare award this time, it was decided that only thesis award may be accepted for presentation. Similarly, as there were large numbers of entries for temporal bone dissection, it was decided that only 8 teams of ENT residents from Delhi teaching institution may be included. Only 1 team per institution will be allowed, with at least 1 junior resident in the team. Starting the new awards, the GBM approved the starting of following new awards, that is Senior Consultant Award and the Best Publication Award. Fixing the date of conference in August, the matter of fixing the new date for conference in August was raised by Dr. Rajiv. The reason given was that after the conference, the account can be easily audited in the same financial year, and transfer to the accounts to the new team will be smooth. These were deliberated upon by the members, and it was decided that there are too many conferences in August and September for time being. We should hold it in March, April only. The matter of the evening meeting was raised by Dr. Rakesh Kumar, and he advised that none of the evening meetings should be sponsored by Delhi OI. And in any case, any institution wants to hold any evening meeting, it should be sponsored by the same institution only. Participation from residents. Low attendance of the postgraduate student in the monthly meeting was discussed, and it was requested to encourage all the residents to attend the same. The new president and the newly elected governing body, Dr. Ashok, handed over the charge to Dr. Ishwar Singh. So these were the minutes of the meeting of the last GBM. So I think these can be passed here. Yes.
I propose that this
minutes
pass.
of the GBM has been approved by Dr. Alok Thakkar, and it's passed by Dr. Hitesh Verma.
Passed.
Next agenda is condolence resolution. This year we had a bad time. It was a hard time, and we lost so many stalwarts and who had been part of our ENT fraternity. Our past president, Dr. Arvind Soni, we lost him because of the carcinoma. Dr. Gurdeep Singh, Dr. Venkat Chalam, Dr. Sachin Goel, Dr. KL Sahani, Dr. PC Sagar, Prerna Jain, Dr. Vikram Oberoi, Dr. Pawan Khedwal, Group Captain Arvind Jha, and Dr. T.S. Sidhu, and lastly, Dr. Arun Goel. So we lost 12 ENT colleagues, and it had been a very bad year for us. And if there is any other name which I missed, can be included. And we pray for the moksha of this departed soul, and for these departed colleagues of us, we will hold 1 minute silence. The next agenda is to receive and adopt the report of Honorary Secretary Dr. Ravi Meher. Please read out present your report.
Yes, sir. So when I took over as a secretary, there were some issues about the income tax notices which the association has received, and our PAN number which was erroneously issued in the company name. So we have tackled all these issues. Income tax notices have been replied, and we have now cleared all the income tax dues in the last 3 years. And there are no pending income tax dues as far as the association is concerned. We also got a new PAN number issued. This is in the name of the association. The earlier PAN number is under the process of cancellation. So it will be cancelled soon, and we will have a new PAN number, and all the transactions will be done through this new PAN number. As far as the new awards which were approved in the last GBM, we started the Best Publication Award and the Senior Concern Award this year. Due to COVID pandemic, we had to cancel last year annual conference in the last minute, and because of this, we had suffered some financial losses also, and we have tried to minimize them. And now we are holding it in the hybrid mode. In the last 2 years, we have added more than 59 new members, and now the member list is 337. So I asked the approval of the GBM to include all these 59 new members. So
59 is a good number.
right. So it has been approved by Dr. Alok and seconded by Dr. Vipin. So we have included 59 new members in the last 2 years. We also have contracted with a new website designing team, and we will be having a new website of the association. And as you know, the face of any association is the website. So we wanted to have a very good interactive website, which will be having online payment modes, etc., etc. The registration should be online, as well as the life membership issue should be also online. So the website will be soon ready, and probably we'll be able to inaugurate the website tomorrow at the inauguration function. The online activities, because of the COVID, we started online activities. We had few clinical meetings, starting with AIIMS, and then followed by Maulana Azad, and then Lady Hardinge Medical College. And then we also conducted few webinars, which were definitely liked by all the members, and I'm sure the new team will continue the same. We also organized picnic. In my tenure, we organized 2 picnics, but this year we could not organize because of the COVID restrictions, and last year because of the COVID, the conference was also cancelled. As far as bidding for the national AOI is concerned, we had gone to the Nagpur annual conference along with Dr. Vipin and Dr. Taneja to bid for national AOI 2022, but unfortunately we lost to Jaipur. So this is regarding the national AOI bid. And lastly, my tenure as a secretary is going to end tomorrow, and I am very thankful to my team, especially our president, Dr. Ishwar Singh, and all the members of the executive who had wholeheartedly supported me during my tenure. And I wish all the best for the new team, and I'm sure under the leadership of Dr. Sunil and Dr. Vipin, the association will, Dr. Taneja, the association will achieve newer heights. Thank you. Now I'll ask Dr. Rajiv Kumar to present his, as a treasurer, his report.
Thank you, sir.
There is some technical problem. Just hold on. Please have patience.
Hello, sorry for the technical glitch. I am very thankful to Dr. Ishwar and Dr. Ravi Meher for last 2 to 3 years for being with me, and mainly the main work is done by Dr. Ravi Meher, and I am happy that sir has solved most of the issues related to income tax, which is pending for so many years, and we have sorted out whatever notices we have received from income tax department. Next slide. So we have audit reports which is done by our new chartered accountant for 2018 and 2019, which is newly filed with all the penalties which we have to do for the last years. And as far as accounts, we have a new PAN card for the society. And we have 3 accounts with us. There are two are saving accounts, and 1 account is with all the fixed deposits. And currently, as Dr. Ravi has told in his report, that we have to close 1 account and merge these 2 accounts so that it would be easier to handle both the accounts. So these are the details of the balances available. 7,04,178 is in the Canara Bank, and we have this fixed deposit with us, which is for the tune of 9,47,727 as of now for this year. So these are our fixed deposits and 2 accounts which are going to merge. And for current year, we are going to file the income tax return for the current year, and this will be handed over to the new team. So as of now, for the last 3 years, we have all the audited accounts in our site, and I hope that this will continue in future also. Thank you, Ravi sir.
So we heard the report of Dr. Rajiv regarding finance status of our association, and I request you to approve or pass this report.
Passed
By Dr. Vipin, seconded by
Dr. Anup Raj.
Dr. Hitesh. Now I request Dr. Taneja, President-elect, to declare the result of the election which were held last year. Dr. Taneja. Hello. Dr. Taneja, Director Professor Mansi, he is the returning officer and he was president-elect last year. Now he will be taking over. I request him to declare the result of the election held. Is he there? Dr. Taneja is there. Sorry. I think Dr. Taneja. Sir, can you speak
Just a minute, sir. He is joined as delegate.
हाँ, उनको थोड़ा वो बना दो, होस्ट बना दो। डॉक्टर तनेजा सर।
He can talk.
Yes, Dr. Taneja.
Then he has to unmute.
Sir, please unmute yourself. Dr. Taneja, please unmute yourself. Dr. Taneja, am I audible to you?
He's a panelist. We are supposed to.
Okay, then I request Dr. Ravi to announce the election result. Okay, so last year the election notice was served, and we received only one entry for the president-elect, and Dr. Sunil Dhanda is elected unanimously for president-elect. Similarly, we received only one entry for the secretary, and I am pleased to announce the name of Dr. Vipin Arora as the new secretary. And third, the new treasurer or the finance secretary, we have Dr. Hitesh Verma from AIMS. And lastly, the editor is Dr. Suvarcha from Maulana Azad Medical College. The rest of the team we will announce at the executive, the new executive member, and the rest of the team will be announced at the valedictory tomorrow. So thank you. I congratulate Dr. Taneja and his team for new executive and new secretary and finance secretary. Now the next agenda is to appoint the auditors for the current year and to fix their remuneration. At the current rate, at present, we have those auditors whom we are paying 30,000 per month per year and annual this thing. So, is it okay or should we change? Sir, I have suggestion. The present auditor is doing the job very satisfactorily, and he has cleared all our dues from the income tax also, and he's sincere. And I think we should continue with the present auditor. He's charging us 30,000 rupees per annum, which include the auditing of all the accounts as well as filing the income tax return. And he has not charged anything extra for all the notices which we have received. So he has replied all the notices without any extra charges. So if the house approves, then we continue with the same auditors. Okay, so it is approved by Dr. Rajiv and seconded by Dr. Hitesh. Now the next agenda is to consider and approve the names of new members. Those 59 members who have been enrolled by Dr. Ravi, so we include them as part of our family. So approved. Now the next agenda is deciding the amount of sponsorship money and names of new awards. Dr. We have wants to speak. Dr. Nupraj has raised hands. He wants to speak. So let him. We have. We have two this thing application for the new award to start. One is from Orania Institute. Dr. Alok Thakkar has sent a request to start an innovative award in the name of Dr. P. Ghosh. Now the question is, how much should be the sponsorship for this award? So, yeah, and Dr. Alok will and us. He will highlight what is the award they want to start.
Good evening to all. Good evening to all. What we had proposed was an activity in the name of Professor Ghosh, and it is up to the House to decide how they want to do it. I am aware that there are already a lot of orations in this meeting. But what to tell people about Dr. Ghosh, for those who are unaware, so Dr. Ghosh has worked at the Lady Harding Medical College and at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in his long career at Delhi. And this proposal was really put forth by both the Lady Harding Medical College and by us at the All India Institute of Medical College. And basically what we are saying is that we should have an award in the name of Professor Ghosh. Professor Ghosh, in his own long career, had been known for his rather innovative research and innovative surgical techniques that he introduced over time. And these have included single-stage vestibuloplasty for atrophic rhinitis. He did at one time propose an extracochlear cochlear implant. He did talk about endolymphatic sac revascularization. Some ideas stood the test of time, some did not. He proposed anterior tracheoplasty, which did very well. Optic nerve decompression was started by him. He made a neoglottis for post-laryngectomy speech. And really his contributions were really so many and so many. He also proposed a palatopharyngoplasty, which received a lot of attention. He got the EMAC award, he got the R.F. Cooper award, and he was actually invited to the Royal College of Surgeons to demonstrate his techniques. In those days, we didn't quite have videos floating around the web. So he had to actually travel down to London to go show his technique. So this gentleman, of course, renowned for his deep knowledge in radiology, in neurology, in neurotology, and for the many, many innovations that he did, we thought that it would be nice to have a Professor P. Ghosh Award for Innovation in Otolaryngology. That is what we have proposed. And we thought it would be best to restrict it to people who were less than 50 years of age, but it's up to this house to take it from there. And yeah, I would feel that the eminence that Dr. Ghosh enjoyed and the contributions that he made to the specialty and the subject, and of course, the contributions that he made to us as a teacher, to both institutions that he served in Delhi, 2 of the 4 teaching institutions in Delhi, we could sort of look at it and perhaps institute this this award, as I said, this award for innovation in his name. There is an issue of how much we need to pay to support this award. That is really for the house to decide. I would say that we look at his contributions and see as to whether he deserves to have, or whether we deserve, or we would be honored by having this an award in his name. And then if that is okay, then certainly his students, including I, are happy to support it for whatever be the cost of the award. So Dr. Safaya has sent in something to say that it's a great decision. Thank you, Dr. Safaya. Dr. Sika has also sent in great proposals in support. So the award.
May I, Dr. Ravi, may I?
Yes,
Dr.
Yes.
So I think we have started the publication award this year. I think we can continue.
We started publication award, best publication award. It will be announced tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, so that can be, if you want to start with for Dr. Ghosh, so that award can be with its name, the best publication award. It's up to house to decide if you want to keep it a different award for innovation, then that it's fine. But we can also the best publication award with its name.
So what we had in mind, and as I said again, it's entirely up to this house to take a call. But what we had in mind, that perhaps we sort of send out a call or we send out a call early in the year about asking for innovations or asking for applications, much like people apply for the awards at the All India level for the EMAC and the R.F. Cooper Award, and the Delhi OI sort of sends out a call, and then we take a call depending on what thoughts come in. It could be by nomination, it could be by application, and we sort of have a 20-minute lecture. That is what was in my mind or our mind when we proposed the LHNC, Dr. Mathur and Dr. Sunil and Dr. Arunabh and Dr. Rakesh and myself. That is what in our mind. that we actually look at innovation be in techniques, be innovation be in surgical techniques, be innovation be in terms of new devices. And we really thought that we could support that. For example, there has been innovation in terms of devices from India. We recently had a VNG or a Frenzel classes. We have had innovations in surgery, and we generally thought that that would be a pattern that we would be most comfortable with. Not a long duration, but a 20-minute short lecture that we could incorporate in the meeting.
So it will be something new to start with. Yes, some new technique or some new instrument or new idea which has to be published, or it will be demonstrated, or if he has to present his work here in the conference.
Yeah.
So any comment from the senior faculty, senior members?
And we would be, yeah, there is Dr. Ashok Kumar wants to say something, I think.
Yes, Dr. Ashok, what is your comment?
Sudhir wants to say something.
Dr. Sudhir, sir?
Yes, I think I will support what Dr. Alok has said. Dr. Ghosh deserves this honor, having worked in academic area for so many years. And it will be only fitting that an award is instituted in his name. Thank you.
Sani also wants to say something.
Dr. Ashok, your comment, sir? Dr. Ashok?
Unmute karo, sir.
Sir.
Dr. Ashok, you need to unmute yourself.
Dr. Ashok, unmute yourself. We can take the comment of Dr. Manorma. Please unmute yourself. Hello, am I audible? Dr. Ashok, please unmute yourself. Dr. Manorma, I think we can take it. It's a good idea, and it's honor the senior person, senior member, and we can think over it and decide the modality as they said they propose. We can consider it.
So if it is acceptable that Dr. Ghosh, that we can have a lecture as we propose in the name of Dr. Ghosh, then we do understand that there would be costs involved with.
Yeah, that is the main question.
Yeah, so I mean, of course, we understand that there will be cost involved with the award, and what should be the, I mean, what has been the benchmark for previous awards previously, and we can look at it from that point of view.
Sir, yeah.
So actually, I did some homework, and I called the National AOI president and secretary, and they said that there is no actual guidelines because we are part of National AOI. So Delhi Association is part of National AOI, so we have to follow the same rules and regulations which the National AOI has to follow. So I inquired, and they said there are no actual guidelines, but the following points were told to me. So first is that there should be significant contribution to the association and society by large. By the
so that
I think there's no doubt about it. Dr. P. Ghosh has significantly contributed to the association and to the teaching as well.
That is academic career.
Yes, yes. Written request which we have already received, supported by 3 members, must be approved by executive committee. We have already approved it. So we have to just decide the sponsorship amount to be decided. It is to be decided by the GBM. And last award, which was instituted by the name of Dr. Anup Raj for quiz, he had paid. I called him and he told me that he had paid ₹50,000 for the award, which was around 10 years back. So the GBM is free to decide what amount should be reasonable. I think it should be reasonable amount.
So if it
was Dr. Ravi, Dr. Saurav, last award was instituted was video award by
quiz award.
No, video, best video presentation award by Dr. Soni in his parents' name.
How much he paid? I don't know because
Yeah, I also don't remember, but that was the last award, not
Acha,
Dr.
but I could not call. I mean, Dr. Soni is not there, so I could not call him. I
Yeah.
don't know the exact amount which Dr. Soni paid for the.
So the executive member or the president during his tenure when this award was started can enlighten us how much was contributed by Dr. Soni to start this award. Anyone who was there that time?
Yes, Dr. Taneja, you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to say that because of a lot of inflation and other things, that it should be revised definitely, and we should ask from the previous one what was the amount at that time. So taking into consideration that one, with some addition, we can go for the revised.
And when the Dr. Soni's award was started, how much was money paid, if any executive member or the president or who started this may enlighten us, please? Or if they remember?
Ishwar, we can find out the year in which year it was started. So during that period, those who were office bearers, from them we can ask.
Yeah, we can ask or we can decide how much should be now.
I think it should be decided.
Decided now only, rather than
GPM.
asking. I think 2 lakhs will be good enough.
I think so. It's a reasonable amount.
In
So
10
I must
years.
say that Delhi OI is quite smart with its finances.
Finance, yeah, we are learned from Rajiv only.
But all said and done, I mean, I'm sure his students, me included, would be more than happy to sort of raise an amount which is equivalent to that much. And thank you. Yes, thank you.
There is another proposal from Dr. Rashmi regarding Dr. Arun Goel, in the name of Dr. Arun Goel. So I got a mail from Dr. Nilima, and they also want, she also wants to start an award in the name of her husband. I think we can start in his name, what the house has to say.
Yeah, she called me up a few days back, Dr. Rashmi Jain, wife of Dr. Arun Goel, and she wanted to start the award in the name of Dr. Arun Goel, and the category was Junior Consultant Award, maybe started in his name. So that was
any
proposal.
comment? I think we can start that also if the house approves.
You want to rename the award in his name?
Yeah, we can rename the Junior Consultants Award in the name of Dr. Arun Goel, and it will be done from the next year. And the amount I'll convey to Dr. Mrs. Agarwal, Arun Goel.
Yeah. I think there shouldn't be any objection to it. I think he has contributed also in teaching and other things.
Next. I think this is approved. Any other comments, sir, regarding this, what we are talking about? Any comment, suggestion?
So,
Dr. Ahuja, KC Ahuja is there. He has raised the hand. Please unmute and give your comment, sir. Dr. Safaya. Then Dr. Manorma.
So, anybody else who supports the award in the name of Dr. Arun Goel?
We support it.
Okay, okay. So it is approved. So,
Now, both the awards in the name of Dr. P. Ghosh for the innovation, a new technique or surgery or any instrument or something new will be in the name of Dr. P. Ghosh, and Junior Consultant Award will be sponsored and it will be in the name of Dr. Arun Goel.
There is a question from Vipin Khera. Is there a policy regarding awards? If not, can be.
There is no policy even in the journal, this thing Delhi National AOI
So we can formulate, or if you have any idea or anything to say, please go ahead.
Sir, I will request the new executive committee to devise a policy regarding naming of the new awards.
I want to speak something.
Sir, please, Dr. Anupraj.
There is already policy in the AOI. It has been formulated long back.
Acha, sir, we are not aware. I am not aware.
You may not be. It is already there, and there is a long discussion. I try to find out those papers, but still I am not able to get it. And I told Dr. Ravi to talk to the present secretary, Dr. Kaushal. He is also searching. The moment he gets it, I think same guideline we can follow.
Sir,
what
we will
AOI
follow them then. There is no problem.
I think we can back, because today also I requested Dr. Rakesh, who is in Raipur, who has kept all the records. So he says, sir, I will serve and search and give it to you. Let us wait for some time.
Know the main point, silent features. You can, and I can also, you can tell.
The silent feature is number one. That should be, he should be known otolaryngologist, number one. Number two, the main point was that the award cannot be started by any other name other than the ENT surgeon. There are some people try to introduce awards by their father's name, mother's name, or brother's name. That is not allowed in AOI.
So it has to be in the name of the surgeon or ENT surgeon.
If you remember, the Senda's daughter award is named like a Senda Nisha award. If you remember, long back it was a PG award was introduced in year 2000. That's why it was, the name was given Nisha, Sandra Nisha award, because her daughter's name wanted to put Nisha.
Sir.
And I wanted to introduce my father's name. That's why my award was named as the Anupraj Suralal Chopra award. It was not by the name of the person who is not an ENT surgeon.
Sir.
First condition. Second condition, the conditions of the award has to be given by the person who is introducing the award. And that has to be strictly followed by the governing body, by the organizers. It is not like that I can introduce my condition in poster award, I can introduce any condition. As such, Dr. Ghosh award, which we are introducing now, all the condition has to be given by the people, those have proposed the award to be started. Same too is for the Arun Goyal award.
Dr. Alok Achodi, AIMS is there, sir. He is agreeing to sponsor and
no.
He will devise the guidelines.
He will devise the guidelines also, sir.
Guideline has to be strictly followed. What Dr. Alok Thakkar will propose. We cannot amend those guidelines.
Sir. They have come with a proposal, sir. There are 8 and 10 this thing points are there.
And secondly, as far as the money is concerned, money has to be kept in a way the interest of that money should give us the expenditure of that. That is the main idea.
So we can have a fixed deposit of the money which they will be giving, so the interest we get out of that fixed deposit, that can be utilized for the execution of the award.
This is a corpus fund. This is called as corpus fund.
In fact, I was not able to speak. I have now proposal. Now GVM should pass it. Instead of FDs, now our body should be allowed to invest money in other funds like mutual funds, and also that the interest rate will be little higher.
Sir, who will always handle this mutual fund, sir?
Yes. No. Your CA is there. He will handle. No problem. I think because 4% interest will not help us to run the for associations. It will not be possible because as such our corpus is very less. Our CA should be passed by GVM. The chartered accountant is allowed to run the show. That's why we are giving money.
What I suggest that if we have to go in this way, we should fix a certain percentage of amount which we can invest in it.
Yes.
Not the full amount.
Right. That is
because we shouldn't put all the eggs in the same basket.
Fully agree.
So,
that has to be.
What is the house has to say about this? The new point raised by Dr. Anupraj that we invest part of our corporate money in the mutual fund. Do you agree?
Sir, I have a suggestion.
Hmm.
I mean, because we are ENT surgeons, we are doctors, we are not financiers.
I do agree. Dr. Ravi,
Handling money is the most difficult.
I
part.
tell you, Dr. Hiranandani in those days have invested some money in UTI.
Sir,
gotta
we
have some
also
money.
have in.
So we should also invest some money in that type of corpus so that we can. It
Right.
is not
Sir,
that we should.
your point is well taken, and we'll definitely try to implement it.
Ponder on it and decide, sir.
Yes,
The new
I agree.
executive, Dr. Taneja, is good at finance. I think he will be in a better position to decide.
It is just a proposal. It is just a.
Dr. Ravi, if I am not wrong, there was some UTI bonds with
Yes.
AI also.
Yes, I don't know what is the status of those bonds.
Has to find out. You might get a handsome money. You get a handsome
The
money.
next point. Sir, next point.
The next, any other member?
Next point, registration fee.
Increasing the registration fee for the life membership. Now we have
Sir,
3,500.
sir, right now we are charging 3,500 rupees for life membership, which I think is very low as far as today's financial status is concerned. There's a lot of inflation, so I think it needs to be raised. I want the House opinion about it and how much we should raise.
I think 5,000 is the right figure.
Yes,
5,000 is the right figure.
35,000.
No, 5,000, 5,000.
5,000.
So there is a suggestion of 6,000 rupees from Dr. Alok Gupta. So I think 5,000 is a reasonable amount. Most of the residents and the younger faculty will be able to afford it.
Hello.
And I think there should be provision that we can revise after every 5 years.
Even I think it should be 6,000 as many of the members who are sitting with me, they are saying let it be 6,000.
Hello.
1,000 is also okay. Though the
Hello?
person who can pay 5,000 can also pay 6,000.
Yes.
Hello, Dr. Ravi.
Yes, sir. Dr. Rakesh, yes, sir.
I was thinking the salaries have gone quite high.
Yes, sir.
So-
It is almost 10 times.
Will be less. So they make it double. The thing is, anything which come cheaper is not important.
So
So
it is not appreciable.
Yes.
Appreciated.
Yes. So
You mean to say-
7,000 should not be a problem.
You say 7,000.
There is no problem, sir. We are already members.
Yes. 7,000. No problem.
7,000.
Dr.
No,
Anup
that
says
time-
7,000.
No. That time salaries were only 4,000 rupees per month.
Sir, make it round figure 10,000.
Okay, very good. So soon our association will become rich.
No, I think what Dr. Taneja was saying, increase it now and maybe every 3
5
to
years.
5 years you should then revise it.
Okay, so I
Yeah,
think
there should be regular
decide
provision.
that
Yes.
we can decide that the amount to be raised to 7,000, and after every 5 years,
It should be raised.
it should be raised by 50%.
No.
It can be
be
reconsidered. It can be reconsidered. Okay. So this is 7,000 rupees for next 5 years. We have fixed.
Yes.
Okay, that's okay.
Right. Thank you very much.
And any other matter? Any other matter you want to take up? Any member has to say anything?
Yes.
Either other. Dr. Vipin has a point to say.
Good evening, everyone. We are having entries for various awards and for the best publication also, and there are duplicate entries. Like the work which has already been published is being presented in this meeting also. So I think for usually for the society, the only unpublished work can be presented. So this is, I think, we should consider that only we should allow only unpublished work to be presented for various awards in this meeting.
I think this is a this is a valid point and we agree. I think it will be approved by everybody. Only those which are unpublished or the one which is already published or it has been in the public domain should not be allowed to present it. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes.
It is approved by Dr. Rajiv, seconded by?
I second it.
Okay, Dr. Taneja seconds it. Any other point? Last. So any other point you want to discuss?
Sir,
This comes to an end of the general body meeting. I thank all the members, all those friends. Sir. Thank you so much. Then we meet in the evening for the dinner at 7:30 in Hotel Park.
But